So a little bit about me. My parents are immigrants. My dad grew up incredibly poor, came to the US. They also had me when they were much older. So my mom was in her mid-40s, my dad was in his mid-50s. I'm an only child, it's just the three of us in the US. And so culturally, generationally, like there was a lot that went into our family. Like someone mentioned, I think, the idea of a closed family, and I think our family was closed outwardly and inwardly. Like we didn't talk to each other. I'm pretty sure my dad was like abused growing up, but like that's just what I've pieced together from like from me being in therapy, basically. And so I just we never talked about feelings. It was always this really bad thing to have. And I remember really vividly, I was in high school and I was really depressed for about 2 years of high school. I think being a human is hard. Being a teenager is really hard. And I just remember finally going to my parents, and I was so scared to do this. And I was like, Mom, Dad, things just feel really heavy. It just feels hard to get out of bed and I'm scared. And I remember my dad couldn't fit that in his head. He was just like, look at this life we've given you. Look at the opportunities that you have. It's ridiculous that you feel bad. And so that's what I internalized, because in a way, he wasn't wrong, right? I had a upper middle class life and I had crazy opportunities and I'm white. There's all these pieces of it that, put me at an advantage in many ways. So I went to college and, with my parents' guidance, I knew I could be a doctor, a banker, or a lawyer. And so I passed out at the sight of blood. So doctor was gone. So I was like, okay, cool. What's next on the list? I will be a banker. So I studied math and economics, and then I went and I got a job, not quite as a banker, but as an economic consultant. So basically doing statistical analysis. We would figure out when big companies sue each other, how much money should one company get and how much money should the other company not get. And I felt like I'd made it. I put on my Banana Republic suit. I went into a big, tall building. I was on a tall floor. There was a career path. I felt important. I was a consultant. I was 22. People needed to hear what I had to say. My dad was just like, who's paying you? You don't know anything. So he was still confused. But so I was like, I've made it. I did all the things I was supposed to do. And from here on out, I just need to climb the ladder. And I remember at the end of the first week, I was like, oh my God, I fucking hate this. And Friday, I had the Sunday scaries, that Monday morning, I was like, do I have to do this every day for the rest of my life? And what I came to was it's ridiculous that you feel bad. And so yes, you're gonna do this every day for the rest of your life and you're gonna like it because you don't fail, you don't fuss, and you don't feel. So I did it for 2 years. And then I started to get debilitating migraines, to the point where I had to go to the ER. I was throwing up. No one could figure out what was wrong with me. And eventually, I think I was just I can't physically do this job anymore. I just can't be living this life. So I went into my boss's office, quit on the spot, had no idea what I was going to do next. And so I'd been going to Starbucks every day, 3 times a day as a customer to escape. And so I knew I needed money. My parents were not going to fund this exploration. I knew I needed health insurance. So I went to Starbucks and I was like, hey, can I be a barista? How does that work? Can I apply for a job here? And this was in downtown Chicago. And I very arrogantly was like, I'm just going to do this while I figure out what I'm actually going to do. And I want to caveat this with I'm not being paid by Starbucks. If Starbucks would like to sponsor me, please contact me. I would love that. I still drink the coffee. But Starbucks was crazy. It was such a wild experience because I was onboarded super quickly, super effectively with a really diverse team, right? There were high school students, there was me, there were people who had been working there for 20 years. And we worked together really well. I really liked the people I was working with. The store is so thoughtfully designed. The music changes based on the time of day. The lighting changes based on the time of day. The circles, at the time, all the circles were round so that you could sit there by yourself and there weren't clearly 3 people not sitting with you. There was so much intention and design behind this brand and behind the way that they had their employees work. They called employees partners, and there's a lot of problems with big corporations, but fundamentally I was there's so much thought put into how this feels for the employees, for the customers, and there's actually a big business opportunity here. And so it was this huge revelation for me of art is not necessarily a way to be super poor for the rest of your life. Feelings matter. Feelings are all important for business. And that's really what launched me on this emotions at work. What does that mean? And so ended up writing 2 books, and mostly those are the books that I wish I had had at that point. And I've been researching this now, working with companies for over a decade, also within companies. And before I actually do this illustration, I want to turn this into a quick exercise. So what I want to ask people is really quick, popcorn style, to shout out the most challenging thing, like emotion you felt in the past 6 months. And just to kick us off, my dad is now really sick. And so the most challenging emotion I felt is like grief and terror at the thought of like staring into that abyss of not having him. And so curious, just popcorn style, most challenging emotion you felt. Okay. Hopelessness, despair, rage, fear. Yeah, and this, I think many people have said it throughout the course of this conference, but this is what comes up over and over and over again in this work. Like I usually come in because someone is like, our team's not getting along, or, you know, we have to like roll out this new policy. And that's because they're seeing people like this, when in fact, this is what's always going on. Like, I think there's some quote, and if there's not, then please attribute this to me. It's like, if you haven't gone through shit, if you're not going through shit, get ready, you're gonna go through shit. Like, if that's not a quote, Liz Fosslien. But I think that this is like so important to keep in mind as a human, but also as like an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as a leader, of like, you are just gonna face some really hard stuff, right? Like that's like, if you have the privilege of building out a company, of living a long life, you are going to have to let people go. You're gonna have to make really hard business decisions. You're gonna lose people you love. Like there's just really tough stuff that is going to happen to you. And so I think the fundamental question that I wanna walk through today is just like, how do you be a leader in those moments? Like, how do you deal with burnout? How do you deal with these really hard decisions and not lose your business? Like, how do you get to the point where you just wanna like curl up in a ball and cry for 3 days and not have your team fall apart? I think that's a really, really hard question. And so I thought that's what I would tackle today. No hard feelings. Quickly, to kind of close the loop, and also just as like a call to action for this group, when I told my dad I was writing this book about emotions at work, he had just retired, he's older, and he was like, I'm so glad I'm retired. I don't know what's going on in your generation. And I was like, thanks for the vote of confidence, Dad. And so then the book comes out, it's like maybe a couple months later, I go home to see him. And I remember the book was in the kitchen, and there were like all these Post-it notes in it. And there were like all these like things were underlined and highlighted. And I was like, Mom, why'd you mark up this book? And she was like, your dad did that. And so I went and asked him, and he was like, you know, I could have used this book. Like, this was so valuable. Like, yeah, there were people I liked. Like, there were conflicts. There was all this stuff. I just didn't know it. Like, I don't know. Like, this would have been really helpful. And I want to talk to you about this time that I did this. And so I share that as like, one, you know, my dad's not like a horrible human being. He was shaped by his experiences. And two, as like, I think the work that all of you are doing today, that we are all doing, is so important, because there are a lot of people that are not where we are. They're like, most people are not at this conference, right? And those are the people that you're gonna have to work with and interact with. And I think by setting an example, by just going forward and courageously doing the work that you're doing, you will actually change. Even if it's like one person, I think it's a really fundamental, important change in the world. Second book, ironically, is basically hard feelings. So it goes from no hard feelings to like the hard stuff. And then today, I think just in the interest of time, because I also want you all to discuss with each other, I think we're just gonna focus on embracing emotions as a leader. Maybe we'll have time for that. Maybe we'll have time for Q&A, but I really wanna focus on this. So embracing emotions as a leader. A couple of things to consider if you're a CEO and founder in particular. And the first thing, I don't think I really have to convince this audience of it, but is that some emotional expression does build trust. So in no circumstances should you ever not have feelings and ever not talk about them. And I was speaking with a founder recently, actually, who had to do layoffs. And he was like, I really want people to look forward. I don't want to focus on this. It was really tough. We made the decision. I just want to be forward looking. I want to move past this. And so I just want to get up and kind of have that mentality, have that be part of my talk. And I was like, if you do that, you're going to look like a calculating robot. No one's going to want to work for you, because they're going to say, well, he didn't care about laying those people off. Why would he care about laying me off? Like, I'm gone. Like, I'm like frantically looking for a new job the moment this meeting is over. If it's on Zoom, I'm doing it now. But also, so I was like, do you feel like that? Is that how you feel? And he was like, no, like I haven't slept for 2 weeks. Like I feel like I'm gonna throw up. I did throw up 2 days ago. This is just the worst thing I've like had to encounter in the past year. Like I feel sick. And so I was like, okay, that's good that you're in touch with that. That's probably also not exactly what you need to say, right? Like you need to kind of walk this line between the two because you want to show that you're having those emotions, but you also need to show that you have it together enough to lead people through this challenging time, or they will also not want to work for you, right? Like your role as a leader is to be a human who can guide people through the hard shit. That is your job, and it is a very, very, very hard job. The other is that your mood has an outsized impact on others. So let's say that you're a CEO and you like don't have your coffee in the morning and you come into the office and you're really grumpy and you're kind of brisk with a couple people. I guarantee you by noon, there's gonna be like a rumor mill of like, oh, the CEO was angry this morning. Something bad is going on. We're all gonna get laid off. Like you have the most information about the organization. And so people are gonna look really hard and long at everything you do to try and get some of that information. The flip side is also true, right? I think we really underestimate how much just being like, thank you for that contribution. Like I really appreciate you asking that question and taking a small risk. That has a huge impact on how people feel, especially if you're in a position of leadership and what they're willing to share going forward. So just being mindful of how much power you have simply by what you're expressing emotionally. And the third is also, you can see the, aspiring banker in me. I still have the bullet points in the slides here. I apologize. Your colleagues look to you and can read you. Really cool research came out of Stanford. There's a emotions professor there named James Gross, and he had a group of people, and he had them watch this like horrible video clip to make them really mad. And then he said, sit around the room and pretend like you're not mad, like suppress all those emotions. And then he had some other people come in and sit in the room. So there's like half the room is people that are suppressing anger, and half the room is people that are just like their normal selves. Then he had a third group of people come in, and he had them sit next to these individuals. So basically, like, it's random whether or not they're sitting next to someone who's mad and suppressing it or sitting next to someone who's in a more calm state. No one in the room could pinpoint that the person that they were sitting next to was mad. But the people, again, they cannot verbally say, like, yes, I think this person was mad. And yet when they were sitting next to someone who was suppressing their anger, their blood pressure and their heart rate went up. And so even if we're not able to like really get when someone is feeling something, we still kind of get it, right? Like if you've ever sat next to someone and they've been like this, or they're like tapping their leg a little bit, you're just gonna be like, I'm nervous too. I don't even know what's going on over there. And it might not even be conscious. So really important to kind of know what's going on within you and know how to express that. So my co-author and I came up with this thing. I actually feel like this group is gonna hate this term. So you could call it something else, but it's basically like selective vulnerability. And the fundamental idea is not that you should not be vulnerable. It's that as a leader, part of it is being vulnerable, being open in a way that doesn't destabilize the team. So you wanna preserve psychological safety and stability. You don't wanna like throw this burden on people and then not give them any way to deal with it. Another way of looking at it is like walking the line between sharing, which builds or earns trust, and oversharing, which can destroy it. And so a couple ways to do this. So the fundamental piece here, like if you walk away with one thing, is to provide a path forward. And so this little formula, I'm a math major, is a moment of openness plus a path forward. That's selective vulnerability. So what do I mean by that? In the case of this leader who had to do layoffs, what I encouraged him, and then what he did end up doing, was going in front of his team and his company and saying like, we did this round of layoffs and this was really hard. And I did not sleep, and I feel sick at the thought, and I'm not taking this lightly. I know what this means for people's livelihoods, and I know that it is incredibly scary to work at a company where layoffs just happened. I do not want us to brush past this. Here's where you can go to ask questions, raise concerns. Here's what I'm gonna do over the next 3 months to make sure this never happens again. Here's what I need from you to help me make sure this never happens again, right? And they're not lying, they're not hiding anything, but it is a version that is very inspiring and honest. Another example, this is a more extreme one, but I wanna talk about the really hard things. August of 2020, it became very clear that my father-in-law was gonna die of cancer. And I couldn't talk about it. Like it was just too much, and I knew that I needed to, at one point, I was gonna have to take bereavement leave because the dynamic between my husband and I is like, he was so close to his dad that I was like, I'm going to be the one who has like her shit together enough to like do all this stuff that needs to be done. And I didn't really know what to do with my team. And at some point, someone said something where it became really clear that like they knew I was distracted and were like kind of worried about what that, like, was I upset with them? What did that mean for the business? And so I finally had a conversation with them where I was like, look, my father-in-law is probably going to pass away in the next coming months. I'm going to take like 1 week to like a month off. I'm not sure yet. I can't talk about it. Like, this is just for me. I just can't talk about this. I really appreciate your support. I know that you want to support me. I can't talk about it. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to always answer your emails within 24 hours until I go out. And what I need from you is I need you to tell me the projects that we're working on that you're really excited to take over so that the team does not fall apart. We all know what's going to happen when I go out for a while. Because sometimes you're going to have to go out. And sometimes it's like, yeah, you just need the break. And so I think, again, it's not saying that you don't need it. It's not barreling through. It's acknowledging that, it's sharing what's going on, and it's having a plan, even if that plan is like, you need to help me figure out the plan. So if you want some kind of script, I think you're all very emotionally intelligent and can probably do this well yourselves, but it's fundamentally like, because of this, I'm feeling this, here's what I'm planning to do, and here's what I need from you. So a couple other tips on this point. One big thing is, I think that really effective leaders do very well, is they flag feelings without becoming emotionally leaky. And again, this doesn't mean you can't have feelings or you can't talk about them, but it's kind of what my manager did, right? It's just saying, like, if you're having a bad day, you just say like, having a bad day, nothing to do with you. You don't have to go into any detail, right? If you know someone really well, you will share a lot more. But I think in some organizations, if you're in a traditional context, if you don't know someone really well, sometimes all you need to do is be like, it's been back-to-back meetings, it's 4 p.m. If I seem a little frazzled, it's just been a long day, right? And that already will put the other person at ease and won't make them read into like every little thing that's going on, because they're gonna sense that something's going on. This is also a really good one to do just with if you're self-aware about how you express emotion. So we were having a conversation yesterday about anger, and someone's like, I'm just like really kind of prone sometimes to have these outbursts, and like, what do I do? And I really think one of the most effective things there is just to be like, hey, flagging that I'm like really upset today. And I don't want that to be taken out on you. That's just kind of sometimes what happens for me. If it starts to negatively impact you, let me know. But I'm just flagging that I'm like upset about this thing, and just putting that to the side, I'm gonna try to now be present with you. And what I found is often that by simply flagging it, you kind of let the air out of the balloon, and it's like, oh, okay, I can actually move past that now and be present. This is also so useful. I know I say I'm an expert on emotions at work. This has been so helpful in my marriage. Just being like, sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and be like, hey, I feel really gloomy. I don't even know why. I'm just letting you know. And then my husband's like, oh, okay. And then he can help me, right? Whereas before, I would just be like, and then he would think I was mad at him, and we would just get into this weird spiral where we both were like, you're mad at me, but I don't know what I did, and now we're not talking, and it's just not healthy. So, you know, do it at work, do it at home, whatever. Putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So I love the example of giving the talk and just like suddenly being like, okay, what would I want if I were in the audience? Unfortunately, maybe not the rest of this talk. But I think it's also really valuable in thinking through, like, I just often see CEOs and leaders and managers really get into this mode of like, this is what I want to say. This is the narrative. This is the story. And forget to say like, if I were on the other side of this, if I'm on the team, if I'm an employee, if I'm new to the company, what do I need to hear? And those two things might be really different. The like what you want to say versus what someone needs to hear. And so always putting yourself in their shoes. It's also a useful metric for like, do you need to say this right now? Like if you have any hesitation when you put yourself in the other person's shoes, you can always share the next day. But I say that words are like toothpaste. Like once they're out, you can't really put them back in the tube. So anytime that you're like, oh, I don't really know, like, is this what my team needs to hear? Like, just take a pause. You can always share again later. Reading the room, the best CEO I ever worked for, what he did really well is he was very willing to drop his agenda. So in the similar thing, if like he had a meeting and it was clear that people weren't paying attention, or it was clear like, I think in the past couple of years, I mean, unfortunately always, but it seems like really poignant in the past couple of years, like the news is really heavy some days. And I think sometimes if you go into a meeting and it's a space and you just notice that people are off, that they're not paying attention, being like, you know what? let's just take the rest of this meeting. Let's turn our cameras off. Let's just not have this meeting. We can do this asynchronously. Why don't we talk about something else? Tell me what you need to be supported. Do you just need the rest of the afternoon for quiet time? Like, I think that is really, really effective in creating a space where people feel comfortable and people actually want to show up and perform well and keep following. And then predicting and addressing concerns. So this goes back to like, not just saying the story you want to tell, but like, what might someone think when they hear that story? What are some holes in the story, and already getting to them? And I want to end with this because I have found this so useful, so hopefully you will too. If not, like, tell me so that I don't keep presenting it. So this is the framework, again, that my co-author Molly and I have come up with. So one of the questions that I often get, so I often speak in more traditional environments, is where they're really like, emotions, what do we do? Oh no. And so one thing, a question that I get from these people is like, I'm into this, right? Like, I generally buy in, but I am not like a ray of sunshine. I'm not an extrovert. I'm not like a out there person. Do I need a personality transplant to like suddenly become an emotions at work expert? No, you don't. It's really useful to know where you sit on the spectrum. So this is influenced by how you were socialized, your culture, your upbringing, whether you feel safe in a space, like you can shift along the spectrum. But basically, we all have a base tendency, and we tend to be either more under-emoters, so these are people that like, you know, have a really good poker face. You don't know as much what they're thinking, or over-emoters. These are the people like, you feel it, everyone knows, you know, there's like no filter. And it's funny, kind of like, usually when I give these talks in person, you know, when I talk about under-emoters, the audience is pretty quiet. And when I talk about over-emoters, there's always someone that's like, yeah, that's me. And it's like, even in the way people react, they're like revealing what they are. And then some people are even-emoters, right? And so again, this is like, it's not your one or the other. There's no good or bad. It's just really useful to know where you sit on the spectrum so that you can either flag that for others or adapt depending on the situation, right? Like, if you're having a really bad day and you know that you're an over-emoter, it is so useful just to be like, hey, I'm an over-emoter, I'm having a bad day, it might come out, I really don't want it to affect our relationship, flagging that. If you're an under-emoter, I think it's actually, so Molly, my co-author, is an under-emoter, and what she realized is she's in a consulting role, so she often works with clients, is that they took her sort of being more withdrawn as not being excited about the project. And so she, like, and yeah, there's probably a lot of other stuff that is at play here, but what she started to do was just like get in the habit of finding moments to lean into excitement and lean into praise and lean into gratitude more than felt comfortable for her. And those are really safe emotions. And I think that can, especially if you know that you're working with like all over-emoters, it can be really useful to be like, I'm excited about this project. And it might feel like you should win an Oscar for your performance or just like super weird. But again, if you know that you're working with over-emoters, they're gonna appreciate that, right? And so again, I think it's this really understanding your tendency, understanding the strengths. So under-emoters, people love to come to you in a crisis because you just like can sort of figure it out. You're calm, you're collected, you're able to like keep everything going. But people might perceive that you're not as like excited, right? Like if they're like bursting with an idea, they might be a little more hesitant to come to you because it's like, that's a good idea. When they wanted like, that's a great idea. Over-emoters, right? Like you are the like hype people. People love to come to you with ideas. You're awesome in a brainstorm. Sometimes when you're having a bad day, it's more likely that that affects your conversations maybe in ways that aren't as productive. So again, just understanding that, especially if you're a leader. And I will leave with this. So this is for you under-emoters. It's applicable to everyone. But here's a really concrete example of how knowing your emotional expression tendency helps you. Under-emoters tend to send out emails that do not have an emotional proofread involved. Do an emotional proofread. This is a real, well, basically real email I got early in my career from my boss, who's a hardcore under-emoter and a hardcore under-emoting emailer. So I get this, and I was like, okay, it's 11. This is on a Thursday night, by the way. And I was like, okay, it's 11 p.m. on a Thursday. People get fired on Fridays, right? I think I heard that. So why is my boss like up thinking about me? This is really casual. There's nothing in here to tell me what we're going to talk about. So guess I should start looking for another job. Like I did not sleep that night. I was like frantically trying to figure out who was still awake that could talk me through my game plan. Like this is a terrifying email to get. And if my boss, like I told this to my boss and they then realized what happened, but like if you know that this is a tendency you have to like hammer out those emails, to be an under-emoter, maybe to not think so much about the emotional intention or how something is going to land, you're going to be much more likely to be like, let me take a step back. Maybe I shouldn't send this. Maybe I should send, hey, I loved your comments on the draft you sent me. Let's discuss tomorrow morning. Sleep well, you know? Sleep well is maybe a little creepy, but, right? And it's just like, it's 2 seconds, and that's just an example of someone being like, this is my emotional tendency. This is a way that I might need to correct for it so that I don't cause like a lot of anxiety, which leads to all these metrics that like leaders should care about, right? Like, I did not perform well on Friday because I had not slept. Just like it was a big disaster. And it would have been completely avoided had this person just done a quick emotional proofread. I have 10 more minutes. Great. Okay, I'm going to take questions, but first, let me quickly go through these slides because there's one thing I want to leave you with. Okay, this is, so I really love like tactical stuff. I totally agree, like not every tip is gonna solve everything. There's a lot of like deep work that needs to be done. But I do think there are exercises, especially if they're like nicely flexible, that can be really helpful for leaders and teams. And so this is something I've done with many organizations. I've done it with the Air Force. I've done it with lawyers and people who are, I would say, initially resistant to a woman with cartoons talking about feelings. And they still come back to me and they're like, yeah, that was pretty useful. So this is called an It's Okay To list. And what I love about this is, this is not my idea. This is actually, the idea came from someone who worked in the UK Digital Services Office. And he was a leader, and what he noticed is that when people joined the organization, there was this amazing onboarding where they heard about the company's values and like, it's okay to do this, and you should be your full self, and you should be vulnerable. And then they never heard that again, right? Like, maybe it was modeled, but it was never explicitly said to them ever again. And so what he decided to do is he had this moment of selective vulnerability where he was like, hey, I don't actually think that we are living our values in the way that we should be. Why don't we, I just want everyone, here's like a document, you can comment anonymously, you can tell me, like, you can have someone else add, whatever you want. What are things that we as an organization want to let each other know it is explicitly okay to do? And then he sort of like went through the list, met with other leadership, and they came up with this list, which they made yellow posters of and hung all over the office. So things like, it's okay to say no when you're too busy. It's okay to ask what an acronym means. I love this, it's okay to have a messy desk. It's okay to have a tidy desk. Like, I love the ones that counter each other, because basically it's saying like, it's okay to just do you. It's okay to prefer tea. It's okay to snack. It's okay to ask the management to fix it. And this is what I love about this, is that yes, it is so much easier to ask what the acronym means if there's a poster sitting right next to you that says it's okay, right? Like, there are these seemingly small nudges that have an enormous impact on what we feel safe doing. And this is also like, this can exist within your team. You don't need to be a leader. Like this, there can be like different teams have different ways of working. You can also do this if you work with clients or customers. Like, this is a nice thing to do at the very beginning of a project to set the tone for like, how do we want to work together? What is it okay to do during the extent of this partnership? And then it can be really different, right? Like, this is not a one-size-fits-all thing. So this yellow one is from Google. So their chief marketing officer put this out during the pandemic. And so it's okay to not know everything, be confused, turn video conference into a walk-in phone call instead. So you can see some like really specific remote stuff popping up there. And what I actually really love about this one is that they put like, it's okay to have a crappy day, but it's okay to have a great day. Because one of the things that I heard, and I felt very much over the past couple of years, is like those days when the news is so heavy, I think it can be like, we're doing good work and I really respect my team, and it feels wrong to celebrate what we're doing right now. Like, it feels wrong to feel proud. It feels wrong to feel good. And so I love that they added that, like, it's okay to have a crappy day, and it's also okay to have a great day. It's okay to smile. It's okay to like find moments of levity, even when things are hard. And then finally, this is an organization I worked with, Death Wish Coffee, and they actually took every single thing from their It's Okay To list, and they made these cards that they put on social in their look and feel that they said ended up being like a really amazing tool for recruiting, which was not the intention. But they said, people were coming to them saying like a company that is so explicitly like is going to put this out there, is going to have this list in meetings and documents, that's the kind of company where I really believe that they're acting on the values that they say they espouse. So just wanted to leave you with this because it's my favorite exercise to do. Thank you, everyone, and yeah, really appreciate it.